Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started with this webinar. I want to make sure we're using this hour that we have in the best way so that I could get you this information and have time to also answer any questions that any of you may have. So let's get started. So this presentation, as it says on the title slide that you see there, we're going to be talking about federal resumes and USAJobs, which is the government's portal in place for posting their job opportunities as well as internships. So my goal with this presentation is really to just get you all started on the path to applying for federal jobs or internships. I'm going to probably be saying jobs most of the time, but when I say jobs, I'm referring to also internships within this presentation. So I really want to discuss some key steps and strategies that I really believe are going to be most helpful for those seeking federal opportunities. So specifically within the executive branch agencies and departments. So this is with the exception of the intelligence agencies. So they're not required to post jobs in USAJobs as other executive branch agencies and departments are. So they usually have their own kind of process for hiring, and oftentimes they have other portals or even their own different website where they may be posting their job and internship opportunities. I welcome any of you here to post your questions in the chat or the Q&A. Either is fine. I will try to look at that throughout the presentation, and if there are questions that are coming up related to the particular slide or thing that I just said, I'll try to answer some of those. But of course, at the end, there'll be a specific time slotted out that we can do Q&A. All right. So if anyone wants to have the live transcript or captions while they're watching and listening to this presentation, there should be a button on the bottom of your Zoom screen there that says something like live transcript or CC or live caption at the bottom. If you just click on that, that'll turn on the transcript so you can see that throughout the presentation. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Oh, and myself, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. So I am Justin Harris. I am an SPA career advisor. So I primarily work with students in the School of Public Affairs, advising undergraduate students, some graduate students, and very recent alumni that are within their first year. So primarily my focus area is on jobs related to federal government, public policy, also going into nonprofit and other sectors, but a large majority of the work that I am doing, employers I'm working with, and the resources that I'm sharing with the students and alumni that I advise is related to the federal government. So for today's discussion, what are we really going to be talking about and covering? So discussing some of the key steps to really writing a strong federal resume, talking about what USAJobs is, so giving you an introduction to that. I'm sure there are some people that may be on this webinar who are not familiar with USAJobs or maybe haven't used that. Some of you may have, but really want to talk about how to use that effectively for your federal job search. Discuss information in regards to setting up job searches using USAJobs. With the federal government, there are a lot of different hiring paths and hiring authorities, and depending on your background, experience, your status, there may be different routes that you can take with your federal job search, and then what positions that you are eligible for to apply for and should apply for. And then lastly, talk about evaluating the job opportunity announcement, the JOA for short. If any of you are not familiar with federal government, they use a lot of acronyms, but JOA is basically the job posting. So talking about how to really evaluate that before you are applying to positions. So first, let's start with the federal resume. Why is it so important? Why am I spending time directly talking about this resume pretty much separately from any other types of resumes that you may have attended some webinars and some presentations on? So the federal resume is extremely important in federal hiring. For many of you, it may be your first impression that you have to make on a hiring agency or our manager or recruiter within the federal government. Okay, especially for those who, you haven't had any kind of prior connections. That is a really real situation in reality now for many of our students and alumni, just because of the limited in-person communications and opportunities that you've had to network and meet people over the last year plus. So it really is an important piece, and it could be your first impression. There's been a lot of work done now to make sure you have touch points and you can connect with hiring managers, with recruiters, with people in HR roles within the federal government professionals. And I encourage you all to do that as much as possible to start to develop networking relationships and learn more about opportunities in the federal government, as well as kind of put your foot in the door. That is a real thing that can happen within the federal government. Sometimes people think that's not the case, but you can. But really, for most people, this federal resume is the first impression and opportunity that you're going to have to share your skills and experience. Okay. It is really the primary way that as an applicant, you are going to communicate that education, those skills, those experiences that you are going to be bringing to the table for these jobs and internships that you're going to be applying for. It's the primary way to do that. It's a big part of the application. Frankly, your resume is your application. There is not necessarily kind of a standard application or something that you would do. Maybe if you've experienced that in other types of job applications before outside of government, they may have a whole thing, questionnaire, other things that you may put in. The federal government, your resume, when you submit that through their portal, it is your application. All right. So let's talk about this federal resume in some more details now. So how to really start to develop it. And I'm going to start first with the question that I get the most when it comes to a federal resume. How long can it be? Well, with the federal resume, they have no limitations on the length. This resume can be 5 pages, it can be 10 pages. And that's going to depend based off of your level of professional experiences, how long you've been in the workforce, things you have done, as well as, the relevancy of the experiences that you're going to include on your resume pertaining to the positions that you're applying for. So the length is going to vary per individual, but there's no limitation. So unlike what you maybe have been told or have experienced with nonprofit employers or private sector or corporate employers, that 1 to 2 page limit, federal government doesn't have that limitation. Some other specifics, I would try to keep it within a 10 to 12 font of your size. Typically margin sizes are going to be fairly standard, 1/2 inch to 1 inch at max. It should really have very simple, easy to read text. That's something that should go for all of your resumes. You don't want to use a crazy type of font style that just looks amazingly, creative. You want to keep it simple. You want to keep it, something that's easy for people to read. You don't want to go too overboard with this. Making sure it is a readable document. That's really, really important. Typically, federal resumes should not have any color unless it's very sparingly used. I really would say probably keep it black and white. That's going to be your best bet with a federal resume. And then the content of that resume is really what matters. That's why you want to keep it simple. You want to keep things clean, but the content, how you're writing your experience points, what types of experiences you're including is really what's going to matter to that hiring manager that's going to be reviewing your resume. So with the job experiences on this, and I am going to show you all a version of a federal resume so you can kind of see what it looks like. But with your job experiences, typically they should be in reverse chronological order. That means you're listing your experiences, which provide really your most relevant experiences first, and then you're going back to older experiences. So this is going to be based upon when you did the roles, but you do want to think about those relevant experiences and having those in there. But it's going to be reverse chronological order based upon when the position ended. Typically, you want to provide really a greater level of detail for the experiences and that on those relevant jobs that you're applying for. So that does require some tailoring, but you're really going to make sure you go in depth with what you did in those roles. Federal government positions and federal hiring managers like to see details. They like to see numbers. They like to see how you made an impact, achievements, quantifiable things. Those are things that are really important. Some specifics of what you would include: start and end dates, month and year, number of work hours, that's something that's very different from resumes in more of the private sector. You're probably not going to be including your number of work hours, but for the federal resume, you will be. Also, things like supervisors' names, contact and their contact information, bullets are going to be the preferred way of putting in that content and that experience. Now, you can use paragraphs. I've seen great federal resumes that have also used paragraph formats. But my recommendation, honestly, is to do bullet points. They're much easier to read. Hiring managers are used to that as well. That used to be not the case, but in the federal government, hiring managers are used to seeing bullet points now. They are much easier to read. Your eyes will flow down to the page easier. So I do recommend using the bullet points as you're detailing out what you've done in your experiences. So here's a little sample. I just wanted to show you two experiences here. And this one doesn't include supervisor name and information. I just kept it simple here. But maybe if it was like an internship experience or something that you did a few years ago, supervisor's still not there or something, this would be a potential way that you would include it. So you can just see some of the information that would be there, like those hours of working week, where you were doing the position at. I even put for this particular sample remote, because I'm sure some of you have had remote experiences and have done your internships or jobs in a remote capacity in some way, at least in the last year. So this is just kind of a sample of what it may look like. And again, I'm going to show you a bigger, a fuller sample of a resume a little bit later here. So let's go into that some more things that you should include in the federal resume, and maybe a few things that you probably don't want to include, because I did say, yes, you're going to include more information, but you don't want to overshare things. So stuff to include would be jobs, relevant paid or unpaid experiences. So that can be internships, those can be volunteer experiences, those could be student clubs and organizations. That could also potentially be academic classes and other experiences, which we'll talk about. But yes, so you want to make sure you're still thinking about tailoring and making sure you're using relevant experiences that demonstrate skills related to that role. So it's going to include those things, your level of experiences, and good, strong examples of accomplishments that you've done in those roles. Your education, so that's your major, minor studies, study abroad, the relevant coursework, as I mentioned before, graduate studies if you're a grad student, those kind of things you absolutely want to make sure you're including. Any types of relevant certifications that you may have. Skills section, this would include definitely your more measurable based skills. So your language skills, what languages you speak and the level of the language that you speak. Technical skills, so going into your computer-based skills, research databases, things of that nature. You absolutely want to make sure you're showing those skill sets that make sense and are relevant. Any type of specialized training. Some of you may have some specialized training in a particular area. I've had a few students who've had, and I think they've done this through either high school or very, very early in college. They've done work with different like emergency management associations or groups. And they've gotten special like emergency management certifications through their participation in a course or a volunteer role in that particular place that they were working at. So any kind of specialized training, especially things that are very relevant to the types of positions that you're going to be doing, would be things that I would tell you to include. And then as well, professional references. So that is also another thing that's a bit different than what you would include on a private sector resume or your more traditional resume. Professional references are going to need to be included on your federal resume. Some things not to include: social security number. And that may seem weird to some people here. You may be younger, but at one point that was actually a thing that people would put on their federal resume. It would be a required piece of the federal resume. Nowadays, no, you won't put social security numbers, any type of classified government or sensitive information, your photo or any other person's photos, any types of other personal information such as your age, your gender, religious affiliations, political affiliations, those kind of things should be left off of this federal resume. And there are actually federal laws around discrimination based off of some of these areas. So make sure that you are excluding that information from your resume. and then any other encrypted and digitally signed documents. So that shouldn't be like embedded into your resume as well. Checking to see, oh, looks like we don't have any questions. I'm just seeing if we have any. That is fine. We'll keep going. So this is actually a new slide that I've added to this presentation in light of the executive order that was signed, I believe, September 9th of this year regarding vaccination status. So I know this is a very controversial topic in our country right now, and I'm not on one side versus the other telling you that, hey, you should get it or shouldn't get it. That's not what I'm here to do. But I wouldn't be doing my job as an advisor if I didn't let you all know that this is an important area right now. If you are looking at the federal government, they now, with this executive order, require all federal employees to be fully vaccinated. And if you are a job applicant, that could potentially affect your ability to get a federal job. What we're starting to see now in federal postings or JOA announcements is that that's specifically being listed in the requirements or conditions of employment section that you need to be able to show proof of your vaccination status. So the reason I bring this up is to not only make sure you all are informed about it, but to give you a little bit of a recommendation. If you are somebody that's fully vaccinated and you are a federal job seeker, you really should think about including that information into your federal resume. It makes it easier for the hiring managers that are reviewing you. That's one less kind of step that they have to really use as okay, are you vaccinated or are you not? Saves you time, saves them time in the process too, because you're already, putting it out there that yes, you are fully vaccinated. So you meet this condition of employment. Now you're still going to have to submit proof of that anyway through the whole process. Now, unless you have some type of medical reason, religious or faith-based reason that would exclude you from having to get the vaccine, which it has it on there that they give you I'll zoom in here for you. It's legally required exemption form that they will be able to give you, and you'll be able to fill that out to show that, hey, I don't have it, but this is the reasons why. So just an important point now for these current times, that would be something that you typically wouldn't include that, but in this case, I think that might be a good move to do. So how do you effectively demonstrate your experience? I know I've talked about that a little bit thus far in regards to showing the content, what you're putting in your resume. That's really what they're looking at, and important things that matter. So how do you effectively do this? A couple different ways. So with your experience, you want to think about showcasing the amount. So how long have you been in experiences, as well as the level. So how in depth. So for example, amount would be something like you led or managed a team of 10 executive board members over a 3-year period. Okay, so that's getting information about how long and the amount and the depth of what you're doing. The level, so how in depth. Something such as if you were a project manager versus just being a team member on an organization, or if you were working with an organization doing an internship and you were working with senior level individuals. Well, because of that, you may be doing much more in-depth work, having a higher level and a greater level of responsibility in that role. I had a student that I met with very recently who was in his role, he was doing specific reports. He was an intern, but doing specific reports where he was reporting that to the VP of the organization. That's a really, really important piece that we made sure that we were putting forth in that resume to show kind of that level and how depth it was. The other area that should be included is the accomplishment piece. So how well did you do something? This is really answering the question of, for an employer, why we should hire you over someone else. Because if you can show that you produce results, that you made an impact, that's an important piece. And that means you're probably going to be able to bring those same kind of skills, or even better, to us in this role. So really think about those things. Think about how you made a positive impact with the organization or the group that you were working with. Did you have cost savings because of the work that you were doing? And you saved the organization, $1,000 by doing this particular thing. I'm just throwing a number out there. Did you exceed deadlines? Did you receive any kind of specific awards or recognition for things that you were doing? Did you make some type of changes or improvements to a process or to a system within that particular organization or experience? So really think about those things when you're developing your bullet points for your experiences. Also, think details really do matter. So I really highly encourage you to not submit the same exact resume for every single position. Take some time before you're applying to review that specific position, review the job opportunity announcement, as well as what's entailed in that. What are they really looking for? What are the key skills and experiences they want? And make sure that you're tailoring your resume to that specific position. So for some of you, it may be similar roles that you're applying for. So you may not need to completely tweak and change everything. But if you're looking at different opportunities, they may be entail different skill sets. You want to maybe do some adjustments and some changes to your resume that make sure you're aligning yourself with that position. I put this in here 3 times because I think it's really important, but keywords, keywords, keywords. Your resumes will be reviewed by real people. But some agencies do use automated systems or applicant tracking systems to review resumes, and at least to help them weed through the process, especially when they've gotten a large number of applicants for a position. So if an agency is using these systems, the automated system is typically will review first. They'll go through that system and to do that review. Then a manual review will be done by a real person, typically somebody in a HR specialist role or something of that nature. They're typically going to review it. So those systems are oftentimes scanning for keywords, terms, industry-specific jargon, technical skills, specific education studies. They're scanning for looking for those things and trying to weed out candidates that are not highly qualified potentially for those positions. Okay. So it's really important to make sure you're pumping in keywords and not only just putting the words in there, but making sure they are in context. So not just saying, well, you're going to have it like, for example, if it's a language skill, you're going to have that you speak Spanish fluently, probably in your skills section, but also within your bullet points, from a particular experience, how are you using that Spanish skill? Okay, so you're pumping Spanish in there multiple times if that position, is specifically looking for Spanish skills. When you're pumping in these keywords, this is your way of matching your KSA, so your knowledge, skills, and abilities, and experience to the job requirements. So that's a really important piece. You want to make sure you're matching some of that same language that you're seeing in those job requirements. Okay. Your resume and the content should really showcase your strengths. When it's appropriate, include those quantifiable accomplishments. I mentioned this already. So numbers, percentages, dollar amounts, etc. Include that kind of information. As I mentioned, you may want to exclude experiences that I would say are not relevant based upon their job duties or transferable skills. So if there may be positions that you have, I understand there are definitely students here on this webinar. You may haven't done some of these things as far as what these roles are that you may be looking for, and you haven't just had that experience, and that's okay. You do want to think about the transferable skills. You probably have very strong transferable skills that may come from some of those student experiences that you may have, or even be a part-time job. You never know where those customer service skills, ability to build relationships with people, writing skills can come into play in a job. So you want to highlight those as much as possible. Try to use plain language in your resume. Avoid acronyms as much as you possibly can. So spell words out. Proofread your resume thoroughly for spelling and grammatical errors. I cannot stress this enough. Oftentimes, when resumes are getting reviewed, they're looking for reasons to weed out candidates. And if you have a lot of poor grammar, spelling errors, that's things that will get you weeded out of an applicant pool. Always make sure you have someone look over and review your resume in detail before applying. Someone that you trust, that you feel can really adequately review your resume in a very strong way and be very critical of it. Anybody have any questions at this point? Okay, we're speeding through this. Great. So I just wanted to show a couple of examples of really strong bullet points in a sense. So you can see here, and I highlighted specific, or excuse me, bolded specific areas in this. So increased congresspersons or congresswomen's social media followers by more than 350%. That's a direct aspect of impact that you made, and it's putting in a quantifiable number. Improved online constituent and community outreach. So real, again, thinking about the impact. One thing I've seen in a lot of times, in a lot of students' resumes is that you'll say something like, well, I'm responsible for A, B, and C in this role. Well, okay, that's great. It makes sense. You were in the job, so you probably were responsible for those things. You want to think about more so making it what actually happened. So what did I actually carry out and do? So you could say I was responsible for these things, but maybe you didn't really do it or didn't do it that well. Think more about talking about how you actually carried those things out and you did those things and what kind of achievements or impact that you made from those. Same thing with the next bullet point. Train 10 new servers. Well, I'm giving an idea of the depth or the amount of something that I was doing. So I trained 10 new servers. That's really important versus training maybe only one person or training no persons. Develop a shadowing method that reduced new service time frame for learning restaurant standards by an average of 1 week. Direct impact there, made a process better, cut down on time of something. So those are the kind of type of bullet points you want to develop to have a really strong resume, and specifically a federal resume. So this is another piece. When you are going into the process of developing your resume, before just starting to write it and build a resume, it's good to go through this 3-step strategic process. And that includes first, one, reviewing and really getting an understanding of the job requirements, because that's going to play an impact in what experiences you maybe decide to include and how you talk about those experiences. Really sit down and look to see and determine if you meet the requirements or don't meet the requirements. And if you're going to really move forward with the application or continue searching for other positions. I don't want you all to spend time, I built this whole resume and then I had a position I looked at, but I really didn't review it. And then it was like, well, I'm really not that qualified, or it really isn't something I really want to do. I just saw the position title, but didn't really read through the role to get what it is. Don't want you to be in a position where you waste time doing that, because that could be time you dedicated to somewhere else or looking at a different role. Identify the keywords and phrases from the requirements and experience listed in the job opportunity announcement. So really take that time to review that. Highlight them so they stand out. So, it might help to copy and paste the whole position description, put it in another Word document, and then going through and highlight what are those keywords or phrases. Sometimes people decide they want to print it out and they want to color code things or number things. Whatever way your process is, make sure you're taking that time to identify what those key things are that they're looking for and those keywords. That way you can incorporate those same words and language into your resume. And then lastly, align. So try to do this process of placing that kind of highlighted information into your bullet points. So by that, it was kind of what I was just referring to. It's like you take the time, I look at the positions, highlighting these keywords and phrases. On my actual resume in my Word doc or Google Doc or however you create your resume, put those phrases or words in there. And then now, okay, add to them to create and develop your bullet points. So that way you're making sure, okay, where you have demonstrated those skills. Again, you have to have used those skills in those roles, but it's helping you to make sure you put that same language in there. Okay, that helps you match that experience to the announcement and the requirements that they're looking for. And this is actually information, this process is the recommended process from the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, who is basically the federal government's HR. So this is the process that they recommend as you go through and you're reviewing these positions. So I want to show you a few samples of a federal resume. I'm going to stop sharing so I can pop that up for you. So give me 1 second to pull it up. Okay. Okay, great. So you all should be now seeing just a sample of a federal resume. And this kind of version is actually one that basically almost comes out from the federal government's resume builder. I haven't mentioned that, but we'll talk about what that is in a little bit here. But you can just see the level of detail, the information. I'm not thrilled with the format, and I think this is just because this is how it comes out of the system if you were to download or print it out, because it has a lot of wasted space. If you are developing your federal resume on your own with a blank Word document, I probably wouldn't have you have all this wasted space. However, the federal government does have a resume builder, which you're able to use. And I'll talk more about that in a second. I just wanted to, for you all to see this and see the level of detail. Let me scroll down. Let me zoom in a little bit bigger here. So you can just see the information that's included, supervisor's information, contact information, how it's doing. It has dashes. Again, I would do more of a bullet pointed, but this is still kind of covers the same thing. Details and information. And this, I will have a follow-up email sent to you all. It'll probably be sent by our program coordinator after this with a survey, but I will make sure I send you some relevant links to you all, as well as the sample of federal resume and a couple other resources. So you can see the level of detail, the education that's included. Here it even has a couple of relevant courses. So you should be seeing those there. Some relevant courses here in these areas. Language skills, references included, and then even additional information that's going into like campus experience as well as skill sets. Okay, let's jump back into the presentation. Anybody have any questions at this point at all? If you do, put them into the chat or the Q&A. All right, so shifting gears here, let's now talk about USAJobs. So USAJobs, what is it? It is the federal government's really online employment management system that will provide worldwide job vacancy information. So it's not just for DC places, it's not just for the United States. These are jobs that can be all over the world. So it's going to include employment information, job application information, forms, and it is updated every day with new positions and new experiences that are being posted or being hired by the different agencies. So it has a very large, robust database of job opportunities. Now, this website, it can be a little bit overwhelming when you first start using it and navigating it, but it really does get much easier over time. The website has been kind of changed and updated, so it's a lot better than what it used to be. But it's one of those ones where you just have to use it, get familiar with it to have a better understanding of how it works and how to navigate it. So I will tell you this one thing, and this is a common thing that I hear with people getting frustrated with the federal job search process. It does take time. It takes quite a bit of time, okay, which really does deter a lot of applicants. A lot of people decide to go, well, I'll go private sector because I can get a job much faster. I really encourage you, if you're serious about a federal job or a federal internship, try to keep moving forward in the process, apply for positions that you're interested in, and kind of just be patient. You really do have to be patient with this process. It's the government, moves slow sometimes. Looks like we have one question in the chat. I'm going to answer this. It says, can I even have a chance to apply for a job in federal government since I am not a U.S. citizen? That's a great question. That was something I was going to cover a little bit later here. But if it's a federal government job you're looking for, it does require U.S. citizenship. That is one of the stipulations of working for the United States federal government. So if you are an international student or international applicant, that would disqualify you because pretty much all federal government jobs have the requirement of U.S. citizenship. So not to be the bearer of bad news, but I did want to share that because that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. All right, so creating an account. So this would be the home screen. If you were to go to USAJobs, you would see that you'll see the sign in arrow right there. So it's two different ways that you can go to create a profile. If you hit create profile or if you hit sign in, I do recommend creating an account. That's going to be something that you're going to have to do anyway to actually go through the full process of applying for a job. Now, you can use the site to search for positions. You can use the site to look for positions without creating an account. But if you're trying to go through the actual process of applying, you will have to create an account. So after you hit those, click any of those buttons, it'll pop up here. It's pretty simple. It'll pop up and tell you, okay, now you need to put in your email address, phone number, or go to create your account. That's the next page and step that it will take you through. Now, I've mentioned to you all about getting a federal resume on there. So they have this federal resume builder that you can use. But you also can create your own resume and put it up on USAJobs. They give you, I believe, I think 5 resumes that you can put on there, I believe, unless they change something in the last month or so. I'm pretty sure it's, I think, 5 different versions of your resume. So to go through this process, you have to upload your resume. It tells you kind of the information there, the type of file it can be. I'd recommend probably keeping it to a PDF or a Word doc. They say you can do the JPEG and the GIF and all those other types of files. Do a Word doc or a PDF. Keep it simple. Don't make things more complicated than it needs to be. The next way to get your resume up on USAJobs is actually to use their resume builder. It actually is a very simple process. I will go through kind of what that looks like and how to develop your federal resume using the resume builder next. But it's easy. They make it simple for you. Some of the federal agencies, when they are posting their positions, they may even say in their positions that they want the USAJobs federal resume builder resume. And that is a requirement that you need to have that on file and be submitting that or have that on your profile to apply for that specific position. So not all agencies want that, but I have seen some JOAs that have said that before. So again, it'll take you through that process. It is recommended by OPM to do this. I would say if you are going to put a resume up there, at least do the resume builder to have that as one version, but then you can also have other versions that you maybe created on your own. And then third, you can do kind of a combination of both, as I mentioned, your personally crafted resume or the USAJobs resume builder version. One other thing about resumes. I mean, we're talking, this presentation is focused on federal resumes. However, there are some agencies, in a sense, that do like to see a more traditional version, like that 1 or 2 page resume that's laid out in that, but doesn't have all the extra details as far as like supervisors, information, their contact phone numbers, pay you gotten in positions, those kind of things, especially for some internships that are not part of like the Pathways program, which I'll mention and I'll talk about a little bit later too. But so that is one of the things that is kind of those, it's depending on what you're applying for and which resume you might use. Still have a federal resume, still use the resume builder, but know that potentially it may be okay to have that version up there as well. So you have a little bit of a flexibility there. And I would tell you to really kind of consult your career advisors, or if you have contacts within the federal government or hiring managers, talk to them too about maybe like for this particular position, if they know which resume may be the best. So as I was saying, multi-document capacity allows up to 5 resumes, as well as 10 other documents. At one little caveat is that you can only make one of those resumes searchable at a time. So you can put them on your profile. Will this be your main searchable resume? So if any of the employers are actually looking through profiles and trying to find qualified candidates, know that they won't be able to access every single one. You can only make one that's a searchable one at a time. The other documents that may be included, Sometimes you'll have special forms if you have a disability. That's a different hiring authority that you may be able to get hired through. If you're a veteran, there's different forms. If you're a former federal employee or something like that, there may be different forms that you also would want to have on your profile, and they may be required for applications to specific jobs. It can also include things like your transcript. That could be something else that would be potentially included in those 10 other additional documents that you can have on your profile. And it is really important to make sure the profile is filled out and completed. It is searchable. And if a organization or agency is looking, they can search through profiles. It also helps them in the process of when you apply, because you're putting in the information in there that's kind of helping with algorithms, to show your interest areas, et cetera. So make sure that you're really filling out your profile. Another question in the chat just popped up. How can I reach a career advisor, or where can I meet? Well, we have career advisors within our main career center, as well as COGOD. I'm not sure which school you're in at AU, or if you're an alumni, but COGOD has their own career advising office. SIS also has their own career advising office, and where they see junior, seniors, and graduate students and their alumni. Within the main career center, you have the School of Public Affairs, the School of Communication, CAS, College of Arts and Sciences, as well as first and second year students within the School of International Service. So our career advisors are available for appointments. You can actually go in and schedule appointments on your Handshake account. So I'm assuming you all found this through Handshake as the events. You have the ability to go on there, click on the Career Center tab at the top. It'll preview you to a next page, and you can go to schedule appointments, go through the steps that it takes you there, and you'll be able to get an appointment with a career advisor that you're assigned to based upon your school and your major of studies. All right. So walking you through the Federal Resume Builder now. So it'll take you through these different points. I want you to kind of take note on the required fields, because there are some specific required fields that you've got to make sure that you filled out. So just take notes of anything that says required fields. On the bottom left of the education section, I strongly urge you to think about how you're going to use this section as a way to boost your resume, especially really for current students or recent graduates, regarding your coursework that you have taken. So really think about, like, hey, I want to showcase that information. Don't neglect that coursework. You're probably full-time students. You're studying, you're writing papers, you're doing policy memos, you're working in teams, collaboratively. You may be doing a lot of different things in it that may be very strong transferable skills that would be something that an employer may be looking for a position. So really think about using that section. And it's a place where you can include those samples of those accomplishments and experiences. Again, also, circled and highlight that experience section, that duties, accomplishments, and related skills. This is where you're going to input in those experiences, those accomplishments, just like we were talking about in developing the resume and those bullet points. This is where that information is going to go. So take time to fill that stuff out. I wish it was auto-populated, but it's not. So you need to go and make sure you're filling that information out. Next, it'll take you through where you can add your professional references. So pro tip for you, before you're adding anyone to your reference list, and this is for federal jobs, this is for federal resume or any others, make sure you have received permission from that person or persons before submitting them as a reference, okay? This is, again, to any application. Always get permission from the person first to be a reference, because the one thing you don't want is for your reference to get contacted and they're like, who's applying? What position? Yeah, you want to give them a heads up and let them know what's going on. So just make sure you do that. It'll go through additional qualifications. The additional qualifications area, especially the additional information, I consider this kind of like a catch-all. So for anything that maybe didn't have a chance to get included in any other parts of your federal resume, this is where that information could go. So it'll take you through this step of this process. All right, searching for federal jobs. These are just some options of ways of how you can go through and navigate and actually narrow down to find different positions. So you can do it by first, of course, putting in keywords and terms to narrow down the positions. So these can be position titles, these can be potential skill set areas, these can be potential interest or policy areas. So any of that kind of stuff can come up and be things that you would include as far as potential search terms to narrow down your positions. It looks like we had somebody who had a question. Give me a second. It looks like someone raised their hand, but I couldn't tell who. If you want to raise your hand again or pop a question into the chat, if you have one, please do so. And I'll keep going until I see that. So other ways that you can search and narrow down the positions that you're looking for. You can do it by job announcement ID. So every position is going to have an ID number that you can put in and look up. You can be searching positions from agency or department name, specific job titles, location, geographic location in the country, occupation. There are series codes, and this is really getting down in depth, but every single types of field or position within the federal government has different series codes that may pertain to that particular area. So this is another way that you can filter and search because you're only want to look in these kind of series codes because you're wanting these types of positions. And then there are a vast number of other filters that you can put out to narrow your results, as well as there's so many different hiring paths, which I want to talk a little bit about now. So at the federal government, and you'll be able to see this on their website as well. And I also have a link in that follow-up email that shares where you can find more information about their hiring paths. But hiring paths are basically different ways that people can get into the federal government with different types of jobs. So you'll have jobs that are open to the public. So any and everybody can apply for these jobs. You'll have specific positions where only federal employees are basically, in a sense, eligible to apply. So you've already been working in the federal government. So there's a few different types of different like service areas. So you have competitive service, you have accepted service, and then you have also, what is the name of it? Senior executive services, so SESs. So if you ever heard the term SESs, those are senior level executive positions. I think we're kind of short on time, so I won't go into the details of what each means. But again, I'll have a link that's sharing that details these out more. But know that there are different kind of competitive or accepted service levels, and depending on what your background is, it can change where you're going through. They have a thing called veterans preferences. So if you are a veteran, that is something that you can claim, and it's a form that you can fill out to have veterans preferences for both veterans as well as military spouses. There are specific hiring paths set for students, recent graduates, individuals with disabilities, and then also kind of specialized programs, things like Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. They may have a hiring path if you've been a part of those. There are other special hiring authorities too. So there are a number of different ways, and it's just too many for me to tell you all now, but just know and make sure that you are exploring what those different pathways are and where you maybe fit in, because it may be an easier route for you to get into the federal government position because you are in that particular status. So this is just a sample. I wanted you all to see what the search page would look like, and this is just a screenshot. So that first arrow there should be showing where you can put in the specific title or department or agency where you can kind of filter out positions that way. Beside that, over here, where you would put in geographic location of where you're looking. Then, as I was mentioning, you have those different hiring paths, and it's listing all those different ones. So you'll be able to check the boxes off here. That way, it'll start to filter out positions that may be specifically for students or recent graduates. This is just a screenshot of the page, but there are a ton more different ways that you can filter. So going to more filters, you can even filter by GS pay scale. So how much a position pays based upon their GS level, specific agencies or departments, you can also filter that way. So sometimes it may be a combination of using multiple filters. You may be looking at a position saying, well, I want to look at something with the Department of Treasury. So I'm going to filter Department of Treasury, but I'm also looking for student roles. So I can do maybe both of those filters to narrow down and see what's coming through there. Okay. It is helpful sometimes to sort the position, not necessarily based upon the relevance, but sometimes based upon the posting date. That way, if you go back to the search again, you can tell, well, I already looked at all these positions underneath it here, so these are older, and let me just look at the newest 10 or 20 positions that have maybe been posted. And each of the positions, if you see here, are going to have the different kind of icons that kind of tell you, well, what are the different hiring paths that they potentially have, who's eligible to apply for those things as well. As I mentioned before, really important to review the job opportunity announcement before you even start developing your resume, and definitely before you actually apply. So some of the most important sections include the duties section, the requirement section, which has those qualifications as experience, those educations, those conditions of employment. So review the requirement section very thoroughly. They also have the how you will be evaluated section. So this talks about, well, are there going to be other measures? Like, are there going to be specific tests? Are there questionnaires that you have to answer? What all do I need to submit? Those kind of things. So it talks about how you're going to be evaluated, as well as how to apply. I really recommend that you preview that occupational questionnaire, and that's typically where that's found, in that how to apply section. Okay. Always make sure that you're reading through the entire announcement before starting the application, because you don't want to miss something that's important that can be included in there. Okay. Here's a sample of what it would look like. And this is an old the screenshot that I have pulled up here, but I just wanted you to see a little bit of what it would look like on the job opportunity announcement. So here you can see the announcement, you can see the different sections. They'll have those listed here at the top of the page. So you'll see each of those there. As well as if you scroll down, it will automatically go through each of those different sections. Okay. Hiring agents are going to state the qualifications of the job opportunity announcement in the JOA. So you make sure you want to meet those requirements as considered for the job. That's an important piece. Here, you can also see things like the time frame that the position is going to be open and closing. That's a really, really important piece because unlike with some private sector jobs where they might not post a closing date or ending date, it might just be until the position is filled and you'll see it posted and they'll still be accepting applications. With the federal government, you have to get your application in by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the date that the position closes to have it reviewed. So any applications that come in before that time period will be reviewed. So that's a really important piece, making sure you get it in. As long as you get it in there before that closing date, they're going to look at it. Now, some jobs will limit their applicants. And the one that's the most notorious for this is the State Department. They will always put out things and say, well, first 50 applicants or first 100 applicants will be the only ones considered for that position. Well, that kind of negates the whole closing date, because the closing date may say 2 weeks, but they put this here and they've already gotten 50 applicants within the first 2 hours of it being posted. So it's really important to be setting up searches and then also getting alerts. So when new positions come through, you immediately are getting those alerts so that you can apply for those roles. Okay, so that's really an important piece. Here you also see things like the pay scale. So the GS pay scale. The GS stands for General Schedule. And this is the predominant pay scale for federal employees, especially in very, I should say, professional, technical, administrative, or clerical positions. There are other pay scales as well. So know that you may be looking and see, well, I see something that says a JS or something else like that of a pay scale. What is that scale? You can find all these scales online and be able to see what those kind of pay ranges are. But GS is the most predominant one that you would probably see most of the time. If you're students, the GS3 or GS4 pay scale is typically going to be their internships and student-based jobs. That's going to be in that scale. 5 to 7 is entry-level positions. 8 to 12 are mid-level roles, and then 13 to 15 are really top-level supervisory positions. And then anything beyond a GS15, that's what we consider the senior executive service types of roles. So just wanted to go through that. I always get a question about the GS pay scale, so I wanted to make sure you all had an understanding of what that pay scale is. One thing I'm going to do, I'm going to jump to my next slide and just show you this, but I do want to show you the specific USAJobs website, because they have changed it up a little bit. I think they did a little bit of a redesign with what the position descriptions look like of the JOA. So they just done a little bit of redesign, and this just happened probably within the last like couple of weeks or a month or so. So I want to show you that because this is a little different. Here are just some additional resources. I really encourage you all to look at some of these other resources. Again, they're going to be sent to you all as well as others within a follow-up email if you attended this session. This also is going to be recorded and it's going to be posted on the Career Center YouTube feed as all of our other webinars in our job search series or resume week series have been posted. So just know that they're going to be up there. And these are just some additional resources. Let me show you all the other website and then I'll take questions. So give me a second to pull that up here. Okay, so you should be seeing this. So as you see, it's not completely different, but it's a little bit of a redesign. They've moved the overview section to this other area here on the right-hand side. So now that's there with the apply button up here. The summary is still here, and then everything else is still listed down. But it's a little bit of a redesign, so I just wanted you to be aware of that and be like, wait, your screenshot doesn't look exactly like how it is. They recently changed this up. So you'll find all the information, agency information, next steps, etc. So it's a very, very long application and an announcement, if you'll see, and I haven't even had all the sections open. So you'll be able to really look through this, give yourself that time, review it before you are actually developing your resume and applying. Okay. Great. So next, do we have any questions? I'll take questions now. Please go ahead and put those in the chat of Q&A if you have any questions at all. Take your time. I'll wait. We have a few minutes before we're finished up. So anything that pops into your mind, if you would rather talk, raise your hand and I can open it up that you can talk and ask your question. Okay. So seeing that we have no questions, which is perfectly fine, I really appreciate each of you all being here today. Oh, actually, we do have a question. Sorry. Great. One just came through. How do you make yourself stand out if you have experience outside of federal or little to none? So that kind of goes back to how you are developing the details of the content of your bullet points or your experience points and what you're talking about, and making sure that that experience as you're developing the resume is matching or is connecting or is showing those transferable skills that relate to that specific role. Okay. One thing is also maybe, okay, do I see gaps in my experiences or skill sets based off of what they're looking for in these particular types of position areas? So with that, think about, okay, are there trainings that I can do? Are there online things that I can do for free? Do I need to take other classes? Maybe do I need to look at these types of internships? So the experience that you bring to the table doesn't have to come from the federal government. You know, a lot of people going into the federal government aren't already coming in with that experience. They have experience from other things that they've done, be it student organizations, in leadership roles, jobs, volunteer experiences, whatever it may be. So you have to think about how you're marketing and connecting that experience with what you're applying for. One thing I would really tell you to do is that I encourage you to work with your career advisor in helping you to develop your resume, not just for federal types of jobs, but just your resume period for your applications. Really sitting down, having your resume reviewed by a professional, having them help you develop some and draft some points, and really kind of teaching you and training you like, well, okay, how do I talk about my experiences? That would be a way I think that you should start with this process of, well, how do I make myself stand out or more competitive? It really is, you need to show that you are bringing the skills and experiences that they want based off of that role, or showing how the experience and skills you have are transferable to that specific role. I would encourage you, and I'm not sure your year or if you're an alumni or what, but I would encourage you, especially if you're still a current student, look at volunteer opportunities in the federal government. So they do have, and I neglected to mention this, but they have the Pathways Internship Program. Pathways Internship is the federal government's official internship program. So the internships are paid. You'll see this Pathways, as well as you'll see Pathways Recent Graduate. So the recent graduate is for someone who is within 2 years of either completing their undergraduate degree or a master's or another professional level degree. So if you're still a student, you wouldn't be eligible to that until after you graduate, but they have the program for undergraduate students as well. So look at a Pathways internships. Now, these are very competitive because they are paid and because they are usually, a little bit fewer types of those experiences, but they're really good experiences. Federal government also has volunteer experiences. So what you'll see them labeled as they'll say something like student volunteer experience or something like that. They won't say internship, but just know that it's still an internship. The reason why they call it a volunteer experience is because it's not paid, basically. So they can't necessarily call it an internship. But look at those opportunities. The newer program within the last few years that has really gotten much bigger and expanded, it kind of started with the State Department, but the virtual federal student services internship, that is a really good opportunity. It's been virtual the last year, 2 years now or so. That's a great experience that it's a federal internship in a sense. You're doing it all virtually and remotely, but you would be doing projects or different requirements and assignments based upon whatever the agency is that you're assigned and working with. So it used to, again, be State Department, but that program has expanded greatly to be way more federal agencies and departments. So I would really encourage you to look at doing something like that as a foot in the door, because you might not come in jumping in being a GS9. You got to think about, okay, it's baby steps, and what other experience can you gain that helps you be more qualified for those positions. So that was a very long answer to your question, but it's multiple things that you can do as you're trying to help make yourself stand out in trying to get experience. So biggest thing is sometimes it's getting experience. If it's student-based experience, if it's campus experience, if it's outside of campus, even if it's volunteer experience, it's still experience. Okay. Any other questions before we close out? Okay. Well, great. Thank you all for being here today, your participation, your questions. I really hope you gained something and learned something from this session. You will receive an email, if not tonight, probably tomorrow, with some follow-up information that'll help you, move forward in this process. So great. Take it easy, everyone. Have a good night.